My name is Joelle Whitaker, and I'm 32 years old. The first clear thing I remember after the accident is the smell. Antiseptic and something floral underneath it, like someone had set a bundle of dried lavender too close to an air vent. My eyes opened to a ceiling that was too white and too bright, and for a moment I had absolutely no idea what day it was, or what city I was in, or why my left arm felt like it had been inflated with sand. A nurse appeared over me almost immediately. She had a long lanyard of hospital badges and the kind of quiet calm that takes years to learn. She said my name twice before I understood it as mine. Then she told me I had been in a medically induced coma for 4 days. I asked her if that was normal. She said, given the accident, it was remarkable that I had woken up at all. That took a while to settle. The accident had been on a Tuesday. Early morning, on my way into the studio to prep for a full day of clients. 2 facial appointments, a laser resurfacing treatment, and a new patient intake I'd been looking forward to all week. I remembered the intersection. A green light, the sound of tires. Then nothing, until this ceiling and this nurse, and the strange sensation of being introduced to my own name. My phone was in a plastic bag on the bedside table, the screen cracked along the bottom right corner but still working. The nurse told me my brother had brought it in on day 2. He and his wife had both visited several times, she said. She mentioned it the way people do when they expect you to be touched. I asked her to hand me the bag. 47 missed calls, clients mostly, plus a few numbers I didn't recognize. A cluster from my mother spread across the first 2 days. But it was my brother's name at the very top of the recent call log, 11 of them, and a voicemail at the top of the list, left on Wednesday morning, just over 2 minutes long. I pressed play. His voice was steady. That's what I keep coming back to. Not shaky, not guilty, not even particularly measured. Just steady, the way he sounds when he's laid something out in his head and decided it's already done. Hey, so listen, we've been at the hospital every day and you're stable, which is the main thing. But the doctors told us your recovery is going to be long, and we started thinking, there's no way you can run the studio through all of this. You've got medical bills coming that are going to be serious, you've got rent on the space, you've got staff, you've got equipment leases. It adds up. We reached out to a broker and found a buyer who was already looking in the area, an investment group. They came in at $285,000 for the full business, equipment, client list, lease transfer, everything. We took it. The money will go into a joint account we set up for you so it's there when you need it. It'll cover your bills and give you something to start over with once you're back on your feet. We did what had to be done. You can thank us later. I listened to it once. Then I set the phone face down on the blanket and looked at the IV line in my arm without really seeing it. Soleil studio had taken me 6 years to build. I'd opened it at 26 in a leased space in Denver's Wash Park neighborhood with $40,000 I'd saved working double shifts at a hotel front desk while finishing my cosmetology license. The first year was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I was the only employee. I took every client who called. I learned to do my own bookkeeping, using a library book and a spreadsheet I built from scratch because an accountant was outside my budget. I repainted the interior myself on a Saturday in February, with the windows cracked because the paint fumes were too strong. I sourced a used laser unit from a closing spa in Boulder and spent 3 weekends learning the equipment manual cover to cover before I ever turned it on. By my late 20s, things started to stabilize. I brought on 2 part-time estheticians. I upgraded to better skincare lines. I added a new treatment room in the 2nd year, expanded the laser menu in the 3rd, and started to see the kind of client loyalty that you only build by showing up consistently for years. Women who rebooked before they left, who texted me on their daughters' birthdays to schedule something special, who referred their friends not because of a discount, but because they trusted me. An insurance appraiser I'd hired 18 months ago had valued Soleil at $310,000. I hadn't been looking to sell, not even a little. My brother had sold it in 4 days while I was unconscious. Without my signature, or at least not my real one. I called him from that hospital bed. He answered on the 2nd ring and immediately started talking about how relieved he was that I was awake, how hard the wait had been, how worried the whole family had been. I listened until he stopped. Then I asked him, as calmly as I could manage with a split lip and a heart monitor beeping behind me, who had legally authorized the sale of my business. He said he had. I asked him on what basis. There was a pause. He said there had been paperwork. A poe, he called it, using the phrase loosely. He said he'd found it in my files at home. He had a spare key from last spring when I'd given him the door code so a contractor could get in to refinish my floors. He said the document had covered, in his view, everything that needed to be covered. I asked him to tell me what the document said. Another pause, longer. He said it was something I'd signed a while back. Something general, he thought. I had never signed a power of attorney of any kind. Not a general one, not a medical one, not a limited one for any specific transaction. I knew this the way you know your own birthday, and the drop in his voice when I pressed told me he knew that I knew. I told him not to contact the buyers again. Then I got off the phone and called Odette Ferris. I'd met Odette 3 years earlier at a small business seminar hosted by the Denver Chamber of Commerce. She practiced business law and commercial fraud, and I'd brought her in the year before to review my lease when I renegotiated terms with my landlord. I found her number in my contacts and dialed it from a hospital room while still attached to a blood pressure cuff. She heard me out without interrupting. When I finished, she asked me one question. Had I ever signed any power of attorney document of any kind? I said no. She said, "Then what your brother presented to execute this sale is a forgery." She explained it clearly, the way she always does, without softening it. A medical POA and a financial POA are two entirely different legal instruments, she said, and even if I had signed a medical POA, which she now confirmed I hadn't, it would not have extended to any authority over a business asset. A financial POA is a separate document with separate requirements. What my brother had apparently presented to the broker wasn't either of those things. It was a fabrication bearing my name, used to transfer a business I owned. In Colorado, that constitutes identity fraud. Depending on how the money had moved, it could also involve wire fraud. She told me the first thing she needed to know was whether the transaction had fully closed, or whether there was still a window to intervene. She called back in 40 minutes. The sale had not closed. The buyer's legal team had flagged a discrepancy during due diligence. The name on my operating license didn't match a form submitted in the transfer package, a clerical inconsistency that had caused the transaction to stall. The funds were sitting in escrow, pending resolution of the discrepancy. Odette said this was the window, and it wasn't a wide one, but it existed. That afternoon, she filed an emergency injunction challenging the validity of the entire transaction on the basis of a fraudulent authorization. She attached an affidavit I dictated to her by phone, still in the hospital bed, stating that I had never signed any power of attorney, had no knowledge of any sale, and had been medically unconscious during the entire period in which the transaction had been brokered and presented. She also formally requested that all funds be frozen pending a fraud review. The buyer's attorneys withdrew the next morning. I found out later they'd been buying undervalued small businesses in Denver for the past 2 years and had closed 7 transactions without incident. Adding the word fraud to their file in official legal correspondence for a studio they'd paid slightly under appraised value for. It wasn't worth it. They backed out, requested return of their earnest money, and sent a letter through counsel, making clear they considered the matter closed on their end. My brother called me that evening. He was no longer steady. He said I was making a catastrophic mistake, that I was jeopardizing my own financial recovery, that no one in their right mind would choose to fight to keep a business they couldn't run over accepting money that would cover their medical bills. He used the word rational several times. He said Odette was a lawyer doing what lawyers do, which was generate billable hours by making simple things complicated, and that family didn't take family to court. I told him what the situation actually was. I said whatever document he had presented to that broker was not a real power of attorney, that I had never signed one, and that there was a name for what happens when you forge someone's signature to sell their property. He told me to calm down. I told him to get his own attorney. 3 hours later, my sister-in-law sent 6 texts in 8 minutes. The substance of them was that I was being selfish and ungrateful, that my brother had spent 4 days of his life sitting in a hospital waiting room for me, and that the least I could do was trust the people who had been there when I couldn't be there for myself. The last message said, "You should be thanking us." I screenshot all 6 and sent them to Odette. What I hadn't known, and didn't find out until I was already home from the hospital, was that my brother had walked those investors through my studio while I was still unconscious. Dori Nakamura told me. She owns the florist shop 2 doors down from Soleil, and we'd been friendly for years in the easy, practical way that neighboring small business owners tend to be. Complaining about the same parking situation, exchanging holiday cards, texting each other when a delivery truck blocked the wrong door. She called me a few days after I got home, and there was something careful in her voice, the way people sound when they know they're about to hand you something heavy. She said on Thursday, 2 days into the coma, 3 days before I woke up. She had seen a man she didn't know walking a group of 3 people through my studio. The front blinds had been tilted open and the door was propped. She recognized my brother because she'd seen him before, dropping things off on my behalf. But the other 3 were strangers. They were taking notes, looking at the laser equipment in the treatment rooms, opening supply cabinet doors. One of them was photographing the retail display. She had taken photos from her storefront window. Not because she thought anything criminal was happening, she said. Just because something felt wrong, and she wanted to have something to show me when I got back. She sent me 4 of them. Clear images, time-stamped, geotagged, my brother and 3 other people moving through my studio on a Thursday afternoon while I was in a hospital bed, still not certain to survive. I forwarded everything to Odette that evening. She called me the next morning and said that given the forged authorization combined with the documented walkthrough, she was going to refer the matter to the Denver DA's office. She said this was my choice. I could keep it civil, pursue damages through the courts, try to recover what had been taken without involving criminal charges. Or I could let the referral stand and see where the DA's office took it. I thought about that voicemail, that voice. We did what had to be done. You can thank us later. I told her to let the referral stand. The DA's office opened a preliminary fraud investigation the following week. My brother hired a criminal defense attorney. My sister-in-law went quiet. My parents called on a Saturday. My father was mostly silent while my mother spoke, which has always been their rhythm. She said the situation had gone further than it needed to, that family problems belong inside the family, and that whatever his intentions, my brother had been trying to protect me in an impossible moment. She asked if there was any way to bring things back before they got any worse. I told her that the DA's office was already involved, that I hadn't initiated it so much as decided not to stop it, and that resolution wasn't entirely in my hands at this point. She asked me if I understood what this was doing to our family. I said I understood it very clearly. What I didn't say was everything else I understood. That in 4 days of sitting in that hospital, not one person had called the studio to let the clients know what had happened. Or to tell my part-time staff there might be a delay. Not one person had asked what I would want done with something I had spent 6 years building. The first decision anyone made on my behalf was to sell it. They made that decision in 2 days and forged my name to do it. That was the whole of the protection I'd been offered. I told my mother I loved her and I ended the call. The business broker eventually cooperated with the investigators after his own attorney advised him to. He confirmed that the document presented as a power of attorney bore my name, but had been submitted by my brother without any supporting documentation. No notarization, no witness signatures, no chain of custody. The forgery was apparent enough that the broker hadn't questioned it closely at the time, but couldn't defend it under scrutiny. He cooperated fully. My brother and sister-in-law, at the time I'm telling you this, were in ongoing discussions with the DA's office. The $25,000 earnest money deposit that the buyers had originally paid, which my brother had received as an advance against the eventual sale, had to be returned to the buyers. Odette negotiated the clawback as part of a parallel civil settlement. My brother liquidated a portion of his retirement savings to do it. I was told this secondhand, through my mother. I didn't ask about it directly. I went back to Soleil for the first time on a Monday in early October, 6 weeks out from the accident, cleared for limited activity but not yet for hands-on client work. I just wanted to see it. Dory had left a small arrangement of white dahlias on my front step. I found out later that several longtime clients had been sending flowers to the studio throughout the closure, not knowing what was happening or whether I was coming back, just wanting to mark the space somehow. I stood in the open doorway for a while before I went in. The laser equipment was where I'd left it. The treatment rooms smelled the way I'd made them smell, eucalyptus and clean air. The retail shelves were untouched. Nothing had changed, because the sale had been stopped in time, because Odette had moved fast, because a discrepancy in a form had bought us a few days, because Dori Nakamura had taken 4 photographs on a Thursday afternoon out of nothing more than a quiet feeling that something was off. I turned the lights on. I sat at the front desk. I opened my scheduling software. Most of my clients had reached out while I was out, some to ask when I'd be back, some just to say they'd heard what happened, and that they were there whenever I was ready. I started calling them back one by one, in the order they'd reached out. My brother and I haven't spoken since that first phone call. My sister-in-law's number is blocked. My parents and I talk occasionally, short calls, surface level, a careful and mutual distance that I don't think either of us is ready to name. I've stopped expecting it to close. Some gaps are too wide once you know how they opened. What I have is the studio. What I have is a client list that waited. What I have is Dori, 2 doors down, who noticed something that most people would have walked past, and who bothered to take out her phone. I rebuilt something once from absolutely nothing, in a bad leasing market, on a budget that left me eating rice and canned beans for 6 weeks straight, with no staff and no safety net. I know how to do it. This time, I didn't have to rebuild from nothing. I had a name. I had a space. I had people who'd been looking for a reason to come back. It turned out that was everything. If you've ever had someone make a decision about your life while you couldn't speak, I hope you do the paperwork now, before you need it. Know what a power of attorney actually covers. Know who has access to your space and your files and your spare keys. Trust the people who earn it, not just the people who've always been there. And if someone tells you that what they did was for your own good, it's worth asking. Good by whose definition? Because in my experience, the people who phrase it that way have usually already answered that question for themselves. Subscribe if you stay for stories like this. I have more and I don't plan on stopping.